Hi there, everybody. This is Alec Bojalid coming to you live, not live, but I'm alive, from the lovely Den of Geek studios. I'm here with Bertie Gregory to talk about animals up close on National Geographic. One thing that interests me is that it seems like a lot of what you're going for here is about kind of the process of wildlife photography just as much as the results. Why was that important to include in this?
I've been fortunate enough to work on wildlife films for nearly 10 years, and during that time I've spent most of the time working on kind of traditional wildlife documentaries where it's all about the wildlife. But on some of those, the last 10 minutes where they sometimes show you a bit of a behind the scenes. So my friends and family that aren't interested in wildlife, all their questions would be about that last 10 minutes and not about the wildlife. And I was thinking, well, why is that? And I think it's because it's much more relatable and it's a great way to engage people with the animals. So I pitched the show to National Geographic and Disney Plus, where we combine that. It's a hybrid show. So it's part wildlife. You'll get all the animal behavior that you could ever hope for with our adventure to try and get the shot. So we parallel the animal struggles with our struggles, because who doesn't like watching people suffer?
In this show in particular, it feels like you go to a lot of geographically diverse locations. How does preparation to even survive environments like that differ from place to place, like Africa, Central Africa, Antarctica?
I would say the probably logistically most challenging shoots are the ones that are in very, very deep remote jungles or ones in very, very cold places. So one of our episodes, we went to try and film a special group of killer whales in Antarctica. And these particular killer whales have an amazing hunting strategy. So they look for seals that are resting on ice floes, so chunks of frozen sea ice. And they wouldn't normally be able to access those seals because they're out the water resting. But this small group of killer whales have figured out that as a team, they can use their bodies to make a wave to wash the seal off the ice and into the water so they can then hunt it. And for that reason, we're not just working in Antarctica there, but we're working in a very icy environment. Those killer whales seek out chunks of ice, and boats famously don't like ice. One of the best parts about making this series is not only do I get to hang out with cool animals, I get to hang out with cool people. So we work with incredible experts all around the world. So for that trip, we had a 75-foot ice strength and sailboat, and there were 11 of us on the boat, so it got pretty stinky over the month. You kind of have to pack everything with you, food up to the rafters, camera gear up to the rafters. And if something breaks, if this XLR cable were to break now, well, I'm sure there's a bunch of spares, but if there wasn't, you could go down the road and grab one in a store. Well, down in Antarctica, there is no FedEx to help you out. There's no one to come help you out. You have to be completely self-sufficient.
I'm glad you mentioned killer whales because I wanted to ask about that. They're kind of gone weirdly viral now for being like a global agents of chaos against like the ruling capitalist elite. What is your take on what our orca friends are doing out in the wild right now?
The first thing I would say is that having seen some of these videos, most of these encounters are killer whales being curious, and they're a big animal, right? And if you haven't spent a lot of time around them, they can be very intimidating when they come close. But I think most of those encounters are curiosity. As for the ones that are sort of allegedly taking out rudders on purpose because the matriarch was harmed previously, and this is somehow killer whale revenge, that seems a little far-fetched. Having said that, they are long-lived animals, they're very clever, and they do pass down knowledge through the generations. And in our killer whale episode, what was really interesting was that that wave washing technique where they use their bodies and teamwork to make a wave, those killer whales, it's not a stretch to say they're using their imagination, because at the point that they're making the wave, they can't see their target. They have to imagine where it is out the water. So the level of complexity and intelligence is baffling. So who knows what they're capable of? And we also saw that they would often prioritize teaching the young how to make these waves and how to hunt the seal over getting the food on that particular hunt. So it shows that, passing down the knowledge, that culture through the generations is more important to them than getting a meal. That's how critical it is.
Did you see anything in the filming of these 6 episodes that really just astonished you? Like, I imagine you've been at this for a while now, and it's hard to be truly shocked by the majesty of nature at this point. But what like really blew you away this time around?
In our first episode where we went to Patagonia to film pumas, mountain lions. You know, on this series, we really tried to focus on individual animals and individual animal families and follow them for a long time. So rather than going to Patagonia to film pumas, we went to try and film one particular puma, and she's called Pataka. And the reason we went to try and find her was that I met her for the first time and filmed her for a month 4 years ago when she was a cub. She's a completely wild animal, but since then, my tracker friends have been keeping an eye on her, and they said, "Yeah, now's the right time to come back and try and find and film her." And the reason being is because when I last saw her, she was a little fluffy cub, completely reliant on mum, totally useless at finding food for herself. And we went back, and the first time we found her, she's not only survived, which is a huge deal for a wild puma. You know, their chances of survival are not great. But she's gone from this fluffy ball of loveliness to now this boss mum, and she has 2 of her own cubs. And we followed her for a month. We actually followed her for that episode. We spent the most time on. It was 51 days of filming. Her primary prey there, her primary food is guanaco, which is like a big wild llama. If you imagine like a camel with no hump on steroids with a really bad attitude, that's what she's trying to take down. And so every time she has to try get food, she has to go through literally a gladiatorial battle to the death. And so that's without giving too much away, that's the climax to the episode, and you'll have to see who wins. But that was truly one of the most extraordinary battles between predator and prey I've ever seen.
As somebody who kind of got their start or came to prominence in wildlife photography, photographing essentially your own backyard, what kind of advice would you give to the burgeoning wildlife photographer who's looking to find the natural beauty in their neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, everyone gets really hung up about camera equipment when it comes to wildlife filmmaking. Clearly, that's important, and your knowledge of your camera is really important. But all of those skills are completely useless if you can't find the animals and get close to them, close enough to them on their terms so that they're comfortable without disturbing them. So I'd really focus on those skills rather than the camera skills first. So you gain those skills from learning from other experts and also from just spending time outside in nature. I think in the words of Top Gun Maverick, time is your greatest adversary, and that is exactly the case in wildlife film. You need to spend the time outside so that nature kind of accepts you as part of the landscape.
Do you have a favorite animal? I mean, I think last I read, you said peregrine falcon. We still going peregrine falcon?
We're still going peregrine falcon. If we were going to go favorite animal from animals up close, it would probably have to be the killer whales that make the waves, just because they're so... everyone always wants to know how clever are wild animals, that those animals just ooze intelligence, and the variety of ways that they communicate and problem solve you'll see in the episode is pretty mind-blowing.
You kind of infamously got your start fairly young, and it feels like you've grown up on screen more or less. What's that process for you been like to just have such a public career from youth to now?
The nice thing about filming wildlife is that you tend to do it in the middle of nowhere, a long way from lots of people, and that's where I'm most comfortable. Occasionally I have to come out from the wilds and come and hang out with you lovely people, which is definitely a different experience. But in terms of what I'm most comfortable doing, it's definitely being out in the wild rather than at these kind of events with lots of people. It's all a bit overwhelming.
This has been Bertie Gregory for National Geographic's
Animals Up Close, and it's gonna come out on Disney Plus in September.